Good morning, South Coast. It's Mike Sylvia, Fall Reporter and New Bedford Guide. I have Mayor Coogan with me from Fall River. We're going to try to do these pretty often. We did one about 2 weeks ago. Figure once or twice a month at least, maybe more often as things pick up. So good morning, Mayor. How are you?
Morning, Mike. How's it going?
I'm doing good. So first thing, we all make mistakes. I want to make sure we want to correct the Romero story. And I know me and you had talked about this. We had reported 8 to 10,000 costs. You think that's way too high? That's something that we got from, someone in the organization, but you talk to those folks. What were you saying on that? And just real quick, I want to give people the Romeros is a group that Catholic following that kind of marches around the South Coast, not just Fall River, they're New Bedford, other areas. But for decades, I think Fall River City has supported them with the police detail. This, I believe, the next one coming up is not going to be supported, but you have supported them in your own financial way. So why don't you just give me an update on that?
Well, it's only I've been told it's only a few $1,000s. It's the numbers. I heard one estimate that was 12,000. I know you said 8 to 10, but that's just crazy. We're not doing anything like that. I think it's a few $1,000s. I know their first fundraiser they had over 1,000 meals sold, so I'm pretty sure they've covered the whole thing. And when I was there that night, that afternoon, supporting them, they already had people signing up to help us as volunteers. So, I mean, I don't see a problem with the Romero's Feast. I truly believe it was something that was thrown out there in the political campaign, like the FBI's in the building or something. They throw these things out. It created a buzz. God bless them. But I never heard a number like that from anybody, DCM, police, government center, telling the Romeros it was going to be $8,000 to $10,000. That was just a number that was off the charts, and I don't think that it's going to end up anywhere near that. I think we had a policeman at the beginning, a policeman at the back, some side intersections we cover, but it's not anything like that. No way.
Yeah, if you're out there, you want to ask the mayor a question, type it up, post it in, and we'll put it up there. Doesn't it? I guess the city has been supporting it for decades, and I'm a libertarian kind of guy. I think government should be out of most things. Doesn't it kind of show that they can raise their own money anyways?
Yeah, I think a lot of these organizations. We had a meeting with one yesterday. We're asking them to pick up a little bit of the responsibility. That's all. Again, I was a long time ago. I used to do a lot of road races. I was a race director. I always got a bill for the police that worked on the course. It just was part of the cost of the entry fee. I think that's what we're talking about. And again, I'm not trying to get people to cover everything from $1, but to throw some money into the hat. It's the kind of the way government should work. I do support what you're saying. I have a little more libertarian thoughts than you do, even on some of this other stuff. I think people should be held accountable for their own behavior. But if you throw some money into the hat to help the city offset some of these expenses, whether it's the rising gas, the rising insurance, the salaries, everything is in one big ball and things are going up. We need your help. We're asking you to pitch in. That's all.
Yeah, I think the last I talked to the chief of the Fall River Police Department, he said they were about 23 officers short. That's been, I think, a chronic thing across the country since the George Floyd 2020 riots and COVID. So I think you're already, Fall River Police Department and others are already short on police officers. Overtime gets forced on a lot of the police officers because just not enough police there. So, and I also believe that most organizations, like you said, if Mike Sylvia wanted to go open up, do a, go to the one of the parks in Fall River and do a big function, I'd have to hire my own police detail, right?
But yeah, you throw some money. Like I said, depending on what the function, who's going to benefit from it? Is Mike going to do something for autism, or is Mike going to do something to use a park to raise money for something specific to him? It depends on the charity. But again, we want some money thrown into the hat. Hey, Mike, we're going to give you 3 policemen. You pay for 2. We try to work it out with everybody to make sure their events are profitable. At the same time, they're covering some of the money.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to the Bank Street Armory. This seems to be like the story of Fall River. To me, I don't know if maybe you disagree. I think it kind of shows a dysfunction of local government. And I just say that as far as people might not know out there, you approved the sale to a private entity that was going to turn into market rate housing with some veteran housing in there. It's been sitting in city council now for almost a year, I want to say. I think it was like July of last year. And and it needed a 2/3 vote, didn't get it. So is the Bank Street Army just going to sit empty for the next 10 years and nothing going to happen with it?
It's funny. I inherited the first 10, Mike. It closed down in 15. I only got here in 19, so it had already been sitting for a while. That's one of those buildings. If you look at what's going on with armories across the state, it's a tremendous structural and rehab challenge. That's what we're dealing with there. They have so much work to do on that building. And Alan McCumber, who owns the buildings, both the buildings across the street, excuse me, guys, wanted to put some housing in there. And I think that was the way to go. The council thought differently. We met with the Historical Society the other day. And just a second. Hey, Ann, can you get me a bottle of water, please? I'm sorry, I got something in my throat.
Yeah.
We met with the Historical Society, and all we're looking for anyone that wants to tackle it is a plan, funding sources, and a timeline. We'll send it right back to the council and work with them on anything. If it's a good, viable plan. I thought we had one, but it just didn't pan out.
Yeah, I was at one of the city council meetings when Alan was there, and he said, "Hey, I'm the only one actually stepping up. I've been through the whole test. I've proven in not only Westport and other areas in Fall River to do projects like this. Clearly, he owns the land, buildings around it. Would provide some of the parking for that area. But it seems like Fall River city councilors and some of the people, it's a little too nostalgic for them. They used to go watch the big basketball Durfee games. They used to see all these things. Their kids, they grew up and went there and used the facility. So it's more like, I liken it to like the Fairhaven New Bedford Bridge. You get stuck on it, a few times a day, and it's like everyone's like, oh, but it's a great piece of history, but it's not very functional in this century. So you have this. Go ahead.
I went to the old Durfee High School. That's a courthouse now. The courthouse on North Main Street is now a children's museum. These things change to put a use to them, so they're still functioning and they can be rehabilitated. I tell everyone, go to Newton, West Newton's Armory. Look at what they're doing up there with that armory. Go to the Lynn Armory. I think what we were talking about basically with Alan was an affordability component for maybe like 6 to 8 of the units, which then would give a preference to our veterans to give them a shot at housing. And the rest of it, the whole building would have been rehabilitated. The piece above it, 84 North Main Street, is in the process of being rehabilitated also. So then you'd have a strip coming right up towards Main to purchase, and we'd have some housing and some people down there with some spendable money. And I'm not against, I have said this 100 times, I'm not against anybody else's plan that brings me funding, a timeline, a use. That's what Alan did. We sent it out to bids. We got one. It was Alan. He's done them before. Fine. I'm not even, like I said, it's not something that's on my radar. We're going to let it sit for a little while to see if someone comes up with something viable, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think issue I usually have is I've been to the YMCA in New Bedford and Fall River, and in my view, they're underutilized, boys clubs and all these locations. And the justification the city councilors vote against it are, we need a rec center for people to do things. And it's like, but they're around and they're underutilized in my view. Do you agree with that? I
most certainly do. I go to the boys club. We have a Keystone Club there, which is our teenage group. There's probably about 25 of them. I brought them all a little Christmas present because they do a lot of good community work. I'm actually talking to them about adopting Bedford Street. You know how you see in communities where they have adopted street? The Keystone Club was thrilled. I said, you guys can adopt Bedford Street from Robeson all the way to Eastern Avenue and help keep it clean and keep an eye. Oh, they were thrilled. So that club, the teenage center, which is upstairs, is definitely underutilized. What happened though, Mike, the nostalgia of the Bank Street Armory, when I was a kid, I think it was the CYO and the Bank Street Armory. Those were your two gyms. Now every school has a state-of-the-art gym. I go to them. I was at Henry Lord the other day. I go to Sylvia. They've all got gyms, and they're all viable, and they're all packed with kids. The middle school basketball championships, they were packed at Durfee. So we have gyms now. They're not back then, save the gym. Okay, there was two of them. Let's save that damn gym. I agree with that. But now there's gyms all over the city that are being used. And as you said, the YMCA, where I'm a member, and the Boys Club are underutilized. So, I mean, I don't, it's trying to get kids to participate as much as it is the space.
Yeah, those are subsidized generally. Your YMCA is usually a lower membership because they're subsidized in many ways because they're nonprofits.
Yep.
So they get a lot of state money. Okay. I did an article called "Why Does City Government Keep Killing Housing?" And I just want to preface this that 850 units were approved at Thursday's zoning board. So it's not like they're killing all. There's a lot being approved, and it's not you. So if we go to the Bank Street Armory, that's City Council killing it. The Zoning Board of Appeals killed a 15 veteran and handicap accessible apartments on Slide Street. They said 80 neighbors objected to the project, stating increased traffic, noise, and congestion. I guess I have a few questions on this. In my view, it's always a supply and demand, right? So if you have a lower amount of supply and you have a lot of demand, housing prices go up, rental, units go up. I don't see cities, really catching up to what we failed in COVID. In COVID, if people remember, we couldn't build new housing. Everyone was locked down. So we're kind of like this last couple of years, there's been a lack of supply entering the market and a lot of demand, right? Does Fall River, one, do you think the city government is good at approving housing fast enough to catch up with the demand? And we just don't have inventory? Because this is 80 neighbors complaining that it's going to cause traffic, noise, and congestion. And I always say it's nice to say you don't want more housing when you have housing, right? But there's a lot of people without housing, and there's a lot of people being forced out of their housing. And so I guess if you give me a summary of what you think the state of Fall River is for housing.
Well, again, that proposal on Slade Street was shot down by the zoning board. Again, the neighbors coalesced behind the issues you brought up, and they killed it. But there is a lot of housing going on in Fall River. Yesterday, with Mike Dion, we toured the old Notre Dame school, which is just going to be a beautiful 40-something units. The crew that did that upstairs in that old school, Mike, is actually what I call townhouse style apartments, where the bedrooms are upstairs and you have a staircase in your apartment where you go up to the sleeping areas, and there's a downstairs. Really, really classy. And that whole crew is going from there over to the old Sacred Heart Rectory and Church to renovate that building. I see units going up all over the city. But to your point, and when we get to final plans for Route 79, I'm hearing there's going to be a ton of housing down there. And that's where we are in Fall River. There's a lot of development going on. Is it enough? I don't know. We were just talking about that a little while ago, a mix of what kind of housing to put in there. I think, like I said to you earlier, I think there were going to be 6 or 8 units in the Army that were going to be more affordable. But I think Fall River is like a 28% subsidized one way or the other. And I know, we do our share to try to help as many people as we can. But for example, I got the numbers yesterday from the Housing Authority. I think they have 5,800 applications for housing right now, Mike. 5,800.
And no openings, right?
Well, they have the way it works. They have some openings at Maple Gardens, but they have to work off of a state list, which means Mike Sylvia lives in Springfield. We send you a letter saying, Mike, you have an apartment in Fall River if you want it. You have 10 days to respond, and you're like, I don't want to move to Fall River. I'm waiting for one in Springfield. But it just clogs the works up. Where I'm Kevin Spardella, the housing director, said, Paul, I have 15 units that are now in this spin of waiting for people to say yes or no. He said, I could fill this with Fall River residents in 5 minutes. And if you remember right, during the campaign, one of the things Sam said, well, you refused to take that housing money. It was the same reasons. I'll take the housing money if it's going to be able to go to Fall River residents. It's going into that pool where my residents in our city, they're not getting a preference. They're going to be, I'm going to build 15 units of housing money, and 10 of them are going to go to people from out of town when I got people hanging off the light poles that need a break on housing.
So why haven't the state reps addressed this?
They have. They've played around the edges. It's a big thing. I think think it's called Champ, but it's a pain, Mike. And you don't, you tell me right now to fill Maple Gardens, and we can put the next 15 people off the list from Fall River. And by the end of the day, you will be looking, I mean, we're in the 90s now, 98, 99% occupancy, but I got a few apartments that are in this spin, but I can't say, okay, move over there, Fall River, you're all set, get in. We'd have it done, but that's not the way the list works. And that was the same thing. And that was one of my weaknesses in that debate. I should have remembered that, but because I can't get the money to help Fall River, I'm not really going to build apartments for somebody from Quincy. They can stay in Quincy.
Yeah, I think that's the problem, is that you have these high rent places like Boston, Quincy, all these places. And then with South Coast Rail coming, people are eyeing the market in Fall River as a cheap place. And I looked up the statistics again, and it's $1,400 for a 900 square foot apartment in Fall River is about the average. So when you see all this new housing, commercial housing coming onto the market, it's still above, it's lower than places like Boston, but it's still very high relative to the history in the last like 10, 20 years. So when you develop housing on the waterfront, that's probably going to be much higher than 1,400, right? Because that's just like prime real estate. So I just don't. It just feels like we don't have enough housing in places like New Bedford, Fall River, and Worcester, these places, because what comes available on the market is still very high.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're living on Social Security and and you keep seeing your rent go up, or and this is something I think is outside the scope of mayors, right? This is something I think in many ways, the real estate market has boomed. So prices go up, taxes go up, landlords pass that on to their tenants. And it's just something that, hurts us all. But I'll move on. I don't know if you saw, Maura Healey, we talked about this yesterday when I come by, talked to you at your office. Maura Healey wants to allow local municipal governments to raise meals tax, increase their meals tax, increase hotel tax, and give you another 5% in the excise tax. Are you for that?
From my first flush of how this is going to play out, I don't think so. I mean, I know it's potential income for the city of Florida, but it's not a lot of money. It really, I mean, we've looked at a couple of numbers, and it's going to, as you just described, when you went through your litany of things that are going up, you're just going to throw another thing into the hat. Oh, by the way, add this in. I'm not, I'm very, very appreciative of the governor and lieutenant governor. They've really, really supported us in Fall River, but I want to see how that plays out. How is that going to be? Is that going to be a lot of money, or are we talking $50,000 to annoy 90,000 people?
Yeah, and I think you said the estimates really weren't there, right? It's like $7-8 a car or something like that, or
$7 a car, I think.
So good leaders plan down the road for a year or two. Is this kind of give your spider senses tingling that cuts are coming at the state level? I know they call them different names, but there's these, I think the 9C. Yeah. So are 9C's cuts coming? I heard Roderick's talking and he said, oh, we're good for 24, but we're working on 25. So it kind of tells me he's kicking this down to 25.
Well, it seems like that way to me too. I hear the same thing, but that's where we are. I mean, I know the revenues were not what they wanted them to be. They were probably down $500 or $600 million, and that long term is not good for the cities. I know that Maura put some local aid increases in there, but I don't know if that's even going to stand, conference committee and the Senate and the House. So we'll see how it plays out. I mean, these are only the first salvos. All these proposals, they have so far to go down the road, Mike, between the House, the Senate, and conference committee before they go back to the governor for a signature. So this is a haul. That's her proposals. I know the Senate has their eyes on stuff, and the House has their eyes on stuff, and it's all going to come together at the end. And that's when you can really talk about it, what it's going to be. I've learned that in my time here. Oh, look at this, we're getting an increase here. Or, oh, look at this, we're going to get cut here. By the time it's all done, that stuff could all be gone.
So Lisa asked, and I talked about, the police officers are about 23 short in Fall River as far as billeted slots at another train. And we know the train is coming. Do you anticipate, with this train, a increase, I guess, in crime is what she's asking. So have you hired more police to protect us from new people coming in and out of the city with the train?
I'm trying to hire more police right now, but I don't know how much is related to the train. We're trying to fill the complement we have, Lisa. It's very, very difficult to get policemen. I was intrigued by one of the things that the governor had in her budget related to public safety was half of your new hires could be waived off of the civil service requirements. So that would give us the opportunity to hire people that might be a policeman in Warwick, Rhode Island, or somewhere else that want to come over and they didn't take our civil service tests. Again, that was one of her preliminary flushes. I don't see how that, I mean, I don't see how that's going to end up yet. But if she's thinking along those lines, giving you some kind of a waiver from the civil service requirements, that might open up a pool to get our complement up to a full group of guys and girls. I mean, we have a lot of women on the force now, but that's what you want. And of course, we're just trying to hire to our old numbers. It's really not related to the train right now, Lisa. But if we see a surge in activity off the train, that's going to be different. I do want people to know that I think statistically, Fall River seems to be going in a pretty positive way with our crime numbers right now. So we'll cross our fingers and say a prayer and hope that it all pans out that way. But I have a lot of confidence in the Fall River Police Department, and if we can get a full load of guys and girls in there, I'll be happy.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, we had this video we posted, and it basically the governor Healy was pretty much tearing up and crying over the migrant crisis yesterday. I don't know if you saw that video. Talking about, kids deserve swimming pools and heat and all this kind of stuff, and they're housing them in government buildings and courtrooms. And I don't know if you follow in New York City, they're canceling school for a week to put people inside of hotels. I mean, inside the schools because of the COVID, these kind of things. In my view, the migrant crisis that is hitting Massachusetts starts in Boston. It always trickles down to New Bedford, Fall River, and those things later on. Right now, the estimate cost is $1.8 billion in these last year and this year fiscal year. Is Fall River? Last time we talked, you said there was no new registrants at school in Fall River. The hotels weren't really being filled. Has that changed at all?
No, I do think we're getting a few more people that are registering their children in school, but we haven't gotten hit with a surge like you saw yesterday, where she was opening up that gym area in Roxbury. We're not there. I don't know how we're going to get our way out of this. It's just tremendous financial burden on the state and in the cities. I know I talked to the mayor of Taunton, and she took a real hit with that whole hotel they contracted for 400 people or something. These are people that are looking for work, are looking to contribute, but at the same time, the steps they have to go through and when we get there and the costs associated with it are just absolutely breathtaking.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get a little political here. I know mayors are not partisan, but I think you and most of the state reps are all Democrats. So I looked at the numbers, in December was the record in the history of America of 300,000 people crossing the border. Massachusetts, the law here is it was meant for women with children or a domestic woman was guaranteed housing if you became homeless. And it's turned into anyone who walks into Massachusetts now gets healthcare given to you. And we know now I can't even find a doctor. If you want to get a doctor in Fall River, it's really hard to find a doctor to take you on. They're not taking new patients. Yeah. They get SNAP benefits. And now I see Maura Healey is trying to push them all to get jobs. And it's like, is this something that you agree with and as a Democrat?
I believe in immigration, but I just believe it's got to be orderly. I can't imagine what's driving these people to walk the hundreds of miles up to our border to come in. It must just be a completely different world than you and I know, Mike. But at the same time, you probably have, 100 million people out there that would come to the United States if they could. And what are we going to do? I mean, we're going to have some real struggles if we don't get a handle on this immigration. People, my great grandfather and grandmother immigrated here. Most of us did, but they did it in orderly fashion with some paperwork and some documentation, and they knew where they were going. I feel for these people that they walk up and we got to bail them out. I'm not against that, but at the same time, something's not working right. No, I don't think. I think that the vast majority of people now are saying this just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, eventually it will come to Fall River and it will come to the South Coast. And yeah, I mean, we are a nation of immigration, but I'm married to a South Korean woman. She came to America. It cost her $8,000 to get here. She went to school at Purdue University. She pays a huge amount of taxes like all of us. And I think that's the way to do it, right?
Some
Yeah.
kind of orderly.
I won't go too much on that. I don't like to get to too much of the national politics stuff, but we got a few more minutes here, so let's see if there's a question. Water bottle. Okay, so I want to go over this. And does the Fall River school system have a absentee problem? And I talk about this because I just saw a report. We put it out last week. I'll read this paragraph real quick. Despite about 1/5 of Massachusetts students being deemed chronically absent from schools, the State Board of Education rejected a proposal on Monday to give more weight to how many students were missing school in accountability measure, citing concerns about giving out sticks instead of carrots. So I feel like, I go to and not much in Fall River and New Bedford, I go to these like public meetings where the school system would invite parents and no one shows up. Like no one. Like I think I saw 8 parents and like 40 teachers. It's like I think there's a problem. It's hard to blame a student who's in middle school or elementary for absentee. I think it's a parental problem. But I guess the question is, does Fall River have an absentee problem like the rest of the state? And are things being addressed? Because it doesn't seem like the state is going to help you. They're just going to push it onto you. And I think that's what usually happens up in Boston. They just kind of leave the cities to their own demise, kind of like this tax thing they're trying to push on you guys. What can Fall River do to help with the chronic absent problem?
Well, we have a full team of attendance officers. We bought them vehicles so they can pick people up and bring them to school. We have automatic phone calls going out every day with follow-up calls by an administrator for the severe people. And as you said, Mike, we've tried giving them meals at night to come in and meet with the teachers. At Durfee one year, we experimented with people coming in to sign for the report card. Now, that meant they could come in anytime from 12 to 8 on that day. If they wanted to see a teacher, we kept the teachers available, like from 3 to 7. We combined a couple of teachers' nights into one, and we asked them to stay. We had food there. We got 20-25%. And it's to get Mike Sylvia's report card, his parents would make zero effort. Now, we did mail out the rest after, but it was kind of disheartening because I really thought, again, if you came in, you had your report card with go see Mr. Coogan in room 432, and you looked at that grade and you said, gee, that's not good. I got to find out what my son or my daughter's doing. They still wouldn't come in. It's a struggle. I've been told, I could be wrong, that nobody in the public in court for truancy for their children has ever been fined around here. And it's only a $25 fine. And I know that it's part of what you said, the carrot and the stick, but if you have these, what we would get at Durfee, Mike, we would get on X2, we would get their attendance records from K to 8, and they'd come up and they'd have 200 and 300 days absent before they got to high school. And I can tell you that when they hit 16 and there's no more mandatory schooling, it gets even worse. So you're in a struggle with kids that have this learned behavior from an early grade with not a lot of parental support. And I'm not talking about the vast majority. I think we're running 92% attendance every week. We get the data every week on attendance in the city of Fall River, somewhere around the low 90s. But you have this hardcore group of parents and kids that don't put a value on education. And it's
I think it sounds to me what you just said, it's all carrots and no sticks. Because I know, so you were vice principal. When I grew up, you didn't want the vice principal to come and visit you. That was the discipliner. The principal was the nice guy, nice lady. And the vice principal is the guy. I remember growing up where a vice principal would pick up a chair and throw it across the room. Like now it's all, I think it's more coddling. And like you said, you're making all these, you're giving all these carrots, but there is no stick at all because, like you said, no one's been fined for truancy. And let's face it, if you go read any statistics like New York Times and really like these legit major news organizations, they'll tell you if you do not graduate high school, you are on the path to prison, unemployment, homelessness, drug abuse, all these kind of things. And like you said, let's say it's 8% of problem truancy in Fall River. That's a lot of kids.
You go 10,000, you get 10,000. Let's keep it simple. You got 800 kids right there. You know what I'm saying? That's what I mean. You're in a position, and again, it could fluctuate on that number, but you have people that don't put the emphasis on education that there should be, and it's tough to work with them and try to get them to understand that their child in grades 1 and 2 and 3 needs to be in school every day. I mean, if they're sick, that's one thing. And I don't know if they are finding them now, Mike. When I was there, they never did, but I've never heard anybody say, boy, they're really rolling the parents in now to try to get some accountability. It's a very tough fight.
So Chrissy says, I hope your wife is feeling and doing better. I didn't know your wife was sick, but I wish her well.
Referring to the accident from a few years ago.
Oh, is that what he said? Okay.
That's what it is, Mike. That was great because, down in Mattapoisett, she literally got run over by a Toyota Tacoma. And during the campaign, I remember reading some people saying, well, a heavy biker fell on her. There was no truck involved. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You don't understand. There's police reports on this stuff. I love it.
I guess let me just ask one final quick question. South Coast Rail, it was supposed to be done last year. Is there any kind of a general idea of when a train is going to be leaving Fall River to Boston?
I got a note from Jean Fox the other day, and she said, we're going to start doing test runs in May and June, and then we'll see where we go from there. So, I mean, I looked at the Weaver Street Bridge the other day, which I thought was one of the last hangups in Fall River. That looks good to me. I don't know. I think all I hear is it's up the line. It's not in Fall River. We're ready to go. Our terminal, our bridges, our lines, they're ready to go. We're just waiting on the MBTA.
Okay, let's close out. Anything you'd like to end with before we end the show?
Look, we got a good stretch of weather going, and we're into February, so a little bit longer to go, and we'll be out in the sunshine. So thanks, Mike. I appreciate you having me on, and I'll give you a buzz after.
Okay, thanks so much.